Welcome back, everybody. How we doing? Week 2 in the books, Mark, and another good one.
Great week, Andy. Great week. Exciting stuff what college football is all about. I'm a little confused. This is week 2 or week 3?
I think, well, according to us, it's week 3. That's all that matters. So we're heading into week 3. I think we took the liberty of combining the first light weekend, which I think maybe the experts called week 0, and we just called that week 1. So I think we're heading into week 3. We just closed out week 2. But yeah, awesome, incredible games as always. And I got to tell you, man, after just 2 weeks, I'm a huge fan of realignment. I think it already is creating an incredible dynamic. I mean, just some incredible games. And I think the level of competition and the teams vying for 1 of 12 spots, I think it's elevated performance of teams that probably would have otherwise been like, yeah, we can take down a big dog like Bama or Michigan or somebody else, but that may be our highlight for the season, but we have no shot of making the Final Four. But now a lot more teams can make the Final 12, man.
I think, and what we're all banking on, are we going to see a college football version of March Madness?
Oh, could be, man. Could be. But well, let's talk about. Let's get right into the recap from last week. We're recording here early in the week, just off a heck of a lineup on the season. And as we did last weekend or last week's show, we started with kind of the good, the bad, the ugly, and we're adding a new category this week, Mark. Right?
Yeah, the big FUGLY. I think that's awesome, Andy.
Yeah, and don't forget, folks, this is a child-friendly PG version, so we won't spell that out for you. But all you adult listeners, you know what the FUGLY, what that's all about. So let's start off with the good. What caught your eye? What was your highlight from Saturday's games?
You know, Andy, I think we talked about it, and you just opened with it, right? It is just the excitement of the weekend and the games and the different things that could happen. The first thing that stands out at me is NIU. It's win over the Irish, huh?
Wow, big time. The Skis,
Right.
The Huskies.
And have you seen or did you see Ontario Brown? This guy's a weapon.
Yeah, absolutely, man.
Right?
Absolutely.
He's a running back. He's a receiver. He reminds me of the guy from San Francisco, Debo. Right?
Yeah, Debo Samuel.
Yeah, exactly. He can do it all. He scored 3 touchdowns, 139 yards on the ground, had 59 yards receiving. This guy was wonderful. So that was a big one for me for the good. The second one, I was actually texting you when you were at the game. I was enamored and glued to the set for the Okie State win over Arkansas.
Oh, man, I didn't get to watch that. I didn't get to watch it. I was busy watching the midshipmen pound on the Temple Owls live, but I couldn't believe it. It sounded like an incredible finish.
It was. And then the last one that I have, and I know it's near and dear to your heart, was the Illini's win over Kansas at home.
Tough one. That was one of our L's for the week, man. Both you and I lost that game. We didn't guess that one. We didn't pick that one right, but that was a bit of a surprise. So, yeah, I had two of my highlights, and they were both in the offensive performance production category. First was Clemson, man. You know, after week 1 and the drubbing by Georgia, everybody said, Debo and Clemson, that program's dead, not using the transfer portal, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Again, second game of the season. But that team, 73 plays for 712 yards of offense and 66 points.
Wow. They put up 66.
Yeah, 66. So we'll see. The season has to play out. But good on Debo and good on the Tigers for probably quieting and quelling some of the critics and coming back a little chip on their shoulder in this past weekend. And then another one from my home state here, about an hour south of where I'm sitting right now, the IU Hoosiers, man, putting up 77 against the Western Illinois Bulldogs. So that's probably, I didn't look it up, but it's got to be near a record point production for the Hoosiers on the football field. That is, at least that typically is what they do on the hard court, right?
Yeah,
scoring 77 in the hoops. But so that was a good for me. the bad. What for you stood out as something not as impressive?
You know, the first thing that I look at is Oregon. Oregon
Um,
is not who we thought they were. They were lackluster in their win. They can't get it going. They've had good quarterback play, but I
yeah,
just don't think that they're who we thought they were. So that was one big one for me. Um, I wasn't impressed with Oklahoma's win over Tulane. I
yeah,
didn't think that they were as crisp as they should have been, and then of course my squad and you were texting me because I had no idea how they were doing. Penn State late comeback over Ball State, that was pretty bad, and LSU didn't look so good either.
right, right. Yeah, I think my going back to your actually Oklahoma played Houston, right? Kansas State they beat Tulane. Oklahoma they only beat Houston by 4 points, right?
Right.
And I think maybe where you got mixed up, I think the old Tulane coach Fritz is at Houston.
Oh, that's right,
But,
Willie Fritz.
yeah, he moved to Houston, so that may be where the tie up is. But yeah, I'll just rewind a bit. It wasn't mine, but Oregon. I think if you go back and we can rewind the tapes. We'll maybe drop it in for this week's episode. But if you go back to our picks and as we were going through those, I recall I think I had told you in the audience. I said if this game wasn't being played at Autzen, I might have gone with Boise State, but Oregon was a heavy multiple touchdown favorite, and Boise State always usually pretty talented team, but they seem to beat up on them where you would think Dan Lanning typically has his teams ready to go and wired up, and that's in the trenches, man. And those guys were getting pushed around a fair amount. That we'll talk about it a bit later, but this running back for Boise State, Ashton Genty, man, Heisman watch after 2 weeks. So I'm right there with you on Oregon. We'll see. We'll see how the season plays out and what happens. But yeah, not terribly impressive. I had for the bad for me. I had Colorado, and it wasn't so much it was their on the field performance, but what just really caught my attention, and God bless social media of the things we used to miss because we didn't have tens of thousands of phones capturing every minute of every live event. But the way Shadur Sanders handled that and leaving the field 2 to 3 minutes early with the backup quarterback in, I just thought was very poor taste and a really bad look and very selfish just from a leadership standpoint. I think that is a time and that game in particular, that environment where you would expect a leader of a team that pretty much got the pulp beat out of them to stand up front and stand out front and say, hey, we got pushed around the field, we got beat fair and square, I didn't do my job, that's on me, we'll get after it next week. But to leave the field like that was a bit cowardly. And then some of his post-game pressers, I don't know if you've watched any of them, but a lot of blame and some may say a little shade thrown to his teammates for their performance. And that just, at least from my standpoint, that's not a leadership trait you want particularly from that position.
I agree. I agree. To me, my ugly was NC State. Their performance was trash. They just looked horrible, and I couldn't watch it. I
Yeah.
turned it off.
Tennessee though, but not don't take Tennessee, the quarterback from Tennessee and just their performance. You don't want to take away that they dominated. I mean, they
Yep.
absolutely dominated, right?
And Nico's coming out party because
Yeah,
he's some quarterback over at Tennessee. He's going to be All American, and he'll be something to behold.
yeah,
Absolutely.
yeah. Well, my ugly for the week, you talked about it earlier on, but you took the other side of the coin, and the Huskies, the Irishman, like losing to NIU at home. Prior to that game, the MAC. Guess what their record was against, believe top 10 teams, highly ranked teams.
NIU?
No, just the MAC, like any team in the MAC.
Oh, I'm going to say 2-38.
0-51, my friend.
Wow.
0-51. And the Skis pulled it off in clearly the greatest victory in NIU football history. Quick shout out to my Uncle Pat and Aunt Renee, Huskies alums. I'm sure they were ecstatic enjoying the game, but I just couldn't believe in the lackluster performance, 16-14, like putting up 14 points against Northern Illinois. That just on both sides of the ball, just really, really poor. So here we go again. After week one, Irish lauded, and I pulled for them. I picked the Irish in week one, which, being a Trojan fan, that's hard to do. But they come back in week two and fall flat on their face after everybody's saying they're going to run the table. They're a shoe-in for the playoff. But again, as we said earlier, realignment and the 12-team playoff, man, I think has changed the dynamic and has a lot of teams hungry, and you can't take any game for granted, no matter who your opponent is.
I agree. I mean, there's nobody that's out of it at this point. There's really 5 guaranteed spots and 7 at large. So at this point in the season, everything's up for grabs.
Yeah. All right. Big Fugly. What was your big Fugly for the last week?
For me, it was hands down Colorado. To see them so lackluster, the offensive line, to get beat down as they did, and then the no class move like you were referencing, it just left a stench on the field, and that was my pick.
Yeah. Okay. Well, my big Fugly, which was, I guess, a bit of not so much Saturday's game, but the first 2 performances, Florida State, man. I mean, you want to talk about a team who is not who everybody thought they were. Florida State right now is in, they've got to be in panic mode, right? And Norvell's got to be hitting every button and pulling every lever he can, because they are a program that is certainly on the heels and has their back against the wall, which I think a lot of people, including myself, were rooting for them this season after, the feeling that they got shafted a bit at the end of last year just because of the quarterback injury late in the season. But they have not proved worthy of playing in any, hell, even in a 12-team playoff, let alone a 4-team playoff for the championship. So Florida State is my big one. And I watched some of that game. I was obviously I was on location, if you will, for last week's taping there in Virginia Beach. And I watched that game Monday night, and they just got shoved around on both sides of the ball. So I think until they figure this out, and this week they've got a juggernaut in the AAC coming in, the Memphis Tigers, right? And Memphis is coming into Bobby Bowden Field, and Florida State better have it figured out, because that offense on the Memphis side of the ball is going to be geared up and pretty powerful. So I could very easily see Florida State going 0-3 to start the year, which I'm not sure any expert in this business would have picked that.
So I guess I stand corrected. It's not wide open, and not anyone can make the playoffs. Anyone but Florida State.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. Seminoles pretty much done already, and it's only heading into week 3. So let's talk about individuals. Let's talk about individual contributors as part of the team. Offensive players for you for week 2. Who stood out?
I think there was 3 of them. I think for me, a very surprised one was the old Ohio State quarterback, Kyle McCord.
You and I are on the same wavelength, my friend. He was the first one I had, Kyle McCord, listed.
Right. You talk about Cuse's, the way that they've been playing. They retired Dwight Freeney's number. McCord throws 4 touchdowns, 381 yards passing.
Yeah, 32 of 46. Pretty impressive.
Exactly. And, and this is against Georgia Tech, right? 31-28. So that was something. Carson Beck continues to, bang the drum. 5 touchdowns, 242 yards, 18 completions. And a shout out I want to give, I know I called it in the preseason, was the Florida quarterback got a chance to play, DJ Ladway, 18 for 24, 456 yards and 3 touchdowns, and looked like he belonged.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see if they start him this week. He
Yeah,
continues to get the nod or not. But Yeah, I had McCord as well. A little state or studio malfunction there, but yeah, I had McCord in my kind of top spot, if you will, and then I had Ashton Genty again, running back for Boise State against Oregon. 25 carries, 192 yards, 3 tutties against that Oregon defense. Pretty impressive. So if you don't have Ashton Genty, folks, on your Heisman list, I'd say put him on there because if he's running for that kind of yardage against the Ducks, I suspect in their games to come, he's going to put up similar numbers. And who knows, maybe he'll take a shot at some of Barry Sanders, some of his records when he was at Oklahoma State. He keeps up at this pace. And then my last one, Blake Horvath, sophomore quarterback for the Navy Shipment. I was fortunate enough to see it live with my own eyes, and I got to tell you, man, the wing T offense might be a really good fit for Navy. They've put up almost 80 points combined in the last 2 games, albeit opponents may not be the nation's strongest. But Horvath had 4 tutties on the day and led that offense end to end. So shout out to him, and he was AAC Offensive Player of the Week. So really good performances by all 3 of those. So defensive side of the ball. Anybody stand out to you? A team, squad, an individual?
This is going to be very non-traditional, Andy. One of the best moves in the college football.
You're a non-traditional kind of guy, so it's all good.
One of the best moves in college football this offseason is clearly the USC Trojans hiring of Danton Lynn. Prior to his arrival, Andy, the Trojans were legitimately had one of the worst defenses in college football for nearly 2 seasons. Coming out of week 2, the Trojans defense has had a shutout for the first time in years, and this defense came through in some big spots in the season opener against LSU. We didn't even highlight Lincoln Riley and Miller Ross this week, which should tell you how impressive USC's defense have been in already. Yeah. So I think for me that was number 1. Number 2, Ohio State throws another shutout, 56-0. And I don't know if our listeners know this. There's a team that has not been scored upon.
Yep, and they were on my list.
Mizzou threw another shutout.
Tigers, yep. They were the team that was on my list. They've thrown up I think it's 88 points in total, not have had a single point scored on them yet. So they've got a formidable matchup this week. We'll talk about that later when we get to picks. But yeah, pretty impressive defense. Individual I had on my side, which very well could be and probably should be if he continues his performance and progression from last year in the Butkus finalist list, but Jay Higgins from Iowa. Linebacker, 6 solo tackles, 5 assists, 1 critical INT, albeit the Hawkeyes couldn't close the deal against the Cyclones. And I'll pause here to make a public service announcement to one of our handful of loyal listeners so far, Mr. Steve Pinkston. He's a good former colleague of mine at Cummins, who runs the Rocky Mount engine plant. Steve's an Iowa State alum, a rabid fan. And he was extremely disappointed when he listened last week and saw me and heard me picking the Hawkeyes. So I thought the Hawkeyes had it in that second half, but hats off to the Cyclones for pulling off the win. But still didn't take the light and the shine off of Jay Higgins' performance. And if you don't know that name, folks, get to know it. And close to home for us. He was played high school football at the high school where both my boys went. My older son was on the team with him for his freshman year and sophomore year, and my younger son had a chance to play with him early on in his career as well too. So shout out to Jay. Hope he keeps it up, but another good performance. So
Andy, I don't remember getting a note from Steve congratulating me on my upset of Iowa State.
That's right. He'll have to send you one of his I guess stereotypical, or not stereotypical, but maybe one of his trademark Saturday morning videos that I sent you on Saturday. Maybe he'll send you a personal shout out this Saturday. So Steve, if you're listening, you get it in time. throw a little love towards Mark's way. He picked the Cyclones and backed them. Clearly, he's the smartest one between the two of us. So, all right, let's get into some hot topics or topics we want to cover off this week. And let's start with let's actually start with a topic you brought up earlier, but the Florida freshman QB in his first start.
So, I know it was against Sanford, and, we talked earlier in the season about the coach being on the hot seat. They got killed the first game of the season. They looked horrible. They had no choice but to throw this kid into the fire. He looks like the real deal. He's a big kid. Not only is he a big kid, he's a strong kid. He's a fast kid. I told you before, it reminds me of a bigger, faster, stronger, and a better passer, Tim Tebow. Could he be the leader that Tebow was? Is this the spark plug this team needs to stay afloat in the SEC with typically the hardest schedule in the country?
Yeah, and do you think, what's your thoughts on him continuing to get the job?
If I was the coach at Florida, knowing what I know and seeing what I've seen, I would go ahead and roll the dice with this kid. Let him develop.
Yeah, I think he will. I think he'll continue. Hopefully, he'll continue to get the nod and be under center. I think certainly his performance this week certainly instilled a bit more confidence back in the program after that opener against Miami. But we'll see. Very very athletic. A bit reminiscent of our starting QB here in Indianapolis, Anthony Richardson. Right, very athletic, solid arm, size, etc. So yeah, hopefully he continues to have some luck there at Florida. And then just speaking of Florida, quick, what do you think's on tap for Napier? Think he's going to make it through the season? And we talked about this in the pre-show. He was on our hot seat list. But what are your thoughts after just a few weeks on him?
If they can't get to 6-7 games, and he's got a disastrous season on his hand, and this kid is not going to be able to develop, he'll be gone before the bowl season.
Yeah, well, it's I was listening to a podcast, another one earlier this week, and they were just talking about that job in general, right? And just what how it just chews through people, right? You think of all the people that have gone through that program, and just been chewed up and spit out. Muschamp, Zook, a number of who was the previous coach to Napier?
I don't remember. It's been such a turnover machine. To your point, it's a pressure cooker, and guys like the old ball coach in Spurrier, who's one of my favorite, or even the guy from Ohio State, Urban Meyer, won 2 national championships back to back with Tebow. They haven't had a rejuvenation of that program, Andy. I don't know if it's talent, coaching, pressure. I'm not sure what's going on down there.
Yeah, and I think Dan Mullen, who I was thinking of. Either
him Ole Miss or Mississippi State. I think it was Ole Miss. Yeah.
Yeah, the prior coach they've got listed is Greg Knox, but I think that was an intern in 21. So, but Mullen, I think it was Mullen. I think it goes back as far as Muschamp, but either Muschamp or Mullen in their first, I think over their first 3 seasons, and they were let go at the end of their 3rd season, but I think they were, or after the first 2 seasons were like 21-3, but pretty extraordinary win-loss record. And to think, the only thing I did hear though, and I was listening to that podcast, is apparently administratively for Florida, just in the administration, they are in a bit of flux, right? So they've got an interim, either an interim president, I think it is. And so the university itself is not completely stable. So, I guess how far under the radar he flies, although I think that's pretty hard with the Florida football program to do that. But yeah, I'm with you. We talked about it early on. I thought maybe he'll get a bit of grace. I think the key thing is if he does go 7-5, maybe 6-6, I think will just be the quality, quote unquote, air quotes, of those losses, right? If those 5 losses are close and they're competitive, maybe he gets another lease on life for another year. But if those losses are consistent with how they fared against Miami, then I suspect he probably gets shown the door. So we shall see, my friend. Next up, let's get into, we both touched on it, but let's get into kind of Saturday's affair. Neon Dion, his effect at Colorado, and just what we talked a little bit about the game itself, and some of the on the field and off the field behaviors, a bit isolated to Shador and some of the leadership aspects. But how about just Dion's presence and his impact at the University of Colorado? Good thing, bad thing? What do you think?
Andy, at first I thought it would be a very good thing.
Yeah.
He came in highly regarded. He had a great 2-year or 3-year run at the HBC. He's got a great pedigree. He was a great player. He's been around great coaches. He's got an understanding of how the game needs to be played. But to be quite honest with you, he came in with a bang last year and he left with a whimper. The off season has been a mess for this guy. He's fighting with the media. He's hiring people that maybe doesn't have the best pedigree from a coaching perspective. And I don't see a big leap in this program needed to take a big leap this year. I think they were 4-8 last year. I think this year they need to flip the script and be 8-4. And I'm not comfortable where he is. And I can't believe I'm saying this. He might be in over his head. He looks to be out coached on that sideline.
Yeah.
So I don't know what your thoughts are.
Yeah, I think I didn't buy into the hype last year. I was a bit of a critic, and although I will say, growing up and being a fan of many professional sports, but baseball, football, hockey being the primary 3, Neon Dion was electric to watch on the field at Florida State, and when he played in the NFL, and when he played for the Braves on the ball diamond. So no doubt about his athletic gifts and his prowess, but all the hype, and I will say, some of his messages that he shares with the team and with the media, and some of his rules, I 100% agree with. But they just, at times, they don't seem to be, either they're not applicable for everybody, i.e. including his own sons, right? Or those in his inner circle. They play by a different set, and those are supposed to apply to everybody else. But it just seems inconsistent at times, right? Just the demeanor. And I think, from my standpoint, I think you would probably agree with me on this, but any team is typically their ethics, values, behavior, obviously performance, but kind of the intangibles, but the non-performance characteristics are often a direct reflection of leadership, right? So those characters, those characteristics, those values, those things are role modeled or championed over and over again. A team, whether that's in business, whether that's on the football field or another athletic field, it typically is a reflection of the head coach. And those behaviors that we've seen last year, with a couple of the cheap shots that were taken, the mouthiness out of the team. And believe me, I'm a fan of trash talk, but at some point you got to balance that. And quite frankly, you also have to back it up. So from where I sit and where I grew up playing sports, a 4-8 record doesn't entitle you a whole lot of trash talk, right? You got to deliver the goods. So I don't know. I wonder if, his departure going to Colorado is for him just another step in the ladder in his attempt to either get to a top program like Alabama, a Texas, if one of those, Florida, who knows if Napier goes during the season or after. I've heard I've heard Kiffin's name thrown out around a lot around that job, but I would have to think that Neon Dion's name would be on that list too. So whether Colorado has always been a bit of a stepping stone to a bigger college program or the NFL, who knows? But I'm with you, man. I think clearly in that Nebraska game, both they were outplayed on the field, and I think they were outcoached. I think Rule and his staff outcoached Dion's staff.
Yeah, me too.
So, all right. Last topic of the week, we have a bit of a highlight is college football's all-time name list. Came across one of the feeds, and I thought it was pretty entertaining. But any on the top of your head that stick out that you've remembered from years past?
Andy, I did not recognize one name, Andy.
Really?
How
about some others? Maybe ones that weren't on the graphic that I sent you, but any others that stand out to you?
To me, growing up in that Oklahoma, Nebraska series was a gentleman named Jarvis Redwine. If you remember him, he was a great kick returner.
Right.
That was a name that stuck out at me. I thought might be there. But no, and what you sent I thought was great. And I think if you flash it, the audience will get a big kick out of it. And it's something quite for discussion. I did see something that kind of tied to what you were doing. If you could look up for me the field goal kicker for Oregon, I believe his name is Status Sapperton. And if that is not one for this list, I don't know. I may have gotten that wrong. The field goal kicker for the Oregon Ducks.
Yeah, I've got Camden Lewis.
Not a Status.
Oh, yeah. Atticus Sappington.
Atticus. There you go.
Yeah, Atticus Sappington. I liked it. I love it. Well, a couple for me. One I couldn't believe when I saw it, and this was, I think it was 2 seasons ago, but was defensive back for Alabama, Kool-Aid McKinstry.
That's a great name.
I remember seeing that flash across the screen, and I texted my cousin and my brother, who are big college football and NFL fans, and I was like, this can't be real. This can't be real. And my cousin's like, oh yeah, and he's a heck of a baller too, and he's a first round draft pick in this past round. But quarterback at Oklahoma, General Booty, former USC starting quarterback, John David Booty, that is. Another one, which is now, I believe, we just talked about Colorado, but Cavassier Smoke, running back at Colorado, and then perhaps for me one of the best of all time, which this is back in 20 and 2021, Fat Watts for Tulane, who's one of the most productive pass catchers and wide receivers for Tulane. So yeah, Mark and I had a bit of fun with that, looking at that list and then just reminiscing about some of the great names in college football. And of course, there's all kinds of lists out there. But yeah, Cavassier Smoke, you gotta love it. But all right, well, we're heading into the highlight for us, at least, of the shows each week, and that's getting into our picks for next week, this upcoming week 3. We'll cut to that here in a bit. Again, as a reminder, you can watch us on YouTube, subscribe to the channel if you've liked what you heard so far. We also have social media presence on X and Instagram, where various items, posting some live footage from the games that either Mark or I are attending, and then just sharing some of our favorites in the space of college football. So we will be back in just a second to give you a recap on how we did last week and what we're looking at for week 3. We're back again. Saturday Sensei here with you. We're heading into week 3, Saturday, the 14th of September. Hard to believe, Mark, that we're getting 3 weeks deep into the season, and it's already mid-September.
Absolutely, it's going fast, Andy.
Yeah, it's been fun. It's been I've enjoyed this a lot more than the text exchange and the banter. So it's been good so far. So how we fared so far this season. Week 2 last week tied it up. Both Mark and I 13-2. If you don't believe us, go back and watch the video evidence. It's all on tape, and we've got it documented. I've got it documented in our spreadsheet. So if anybody wants to check us or audit us mid-season, full season, what have you, we'll have the data for you. And on the season so far, the Sensei is at 25-6, and Senpai Kukolo there marks at 23-8. So far a good start to our picks. And again, folks, we're picking winners and losers. We're not into the spread. We're not trying to give you bets you should make and how you might want to make a little spending money. You do that on your own. There's lots of other outlets, but again, we're doing this for the fun of the game and picking those who are going to win or lose. So we'll kick it off here as we start off Saturday. And first one up is LSU at South Carolina. What are you thinking, Mark?
Gamecocks all the way, Andy.
Oh, wow. Really? Really? What has you picking Gamecocks? What are you convinced with USC on?
LSU did not look good last week. They didn't look good the first week. I'm thinking that this is going to be an upset special.
Oh, wow. Okay.
I'm going with the Gamecocks.
Okay. I'm going to take the Tigers. So I've got the Tigers over South Carolina. I think LSU has got better athletes, and I think they're going to. Their overall record here in the last, what we'll call it, since, boy, if I go all the way back to, there's some missing years here, but the years that they played. So I've got a record all the way back to October the 11th, 1930. In terms of the record, and for those over the course of 1930 to 2020, so 70 years, they played a total of 22 times. Have a crack at what the record is, LSU versus South Carolina.
23-3.
Mark, that's 26. They've only played 22 times.
I'm sorry, 22 times. Sorry. 22 times. I'm going to give it 18-4.
Okay. Close. 19-2-1.
Okay.
The last tie being September 30th of 1995. That game was in Columbia. So I'm going with the pick you had against my Trojans in week 1. Go Tigers. Next up, this is a big one. This is a big one. This is one of the games that I have gone back and forth on a couple times, and I'm really interested on where you're going to land. But B.O.B., Bill O'Brien, taking the Eagles into Columbia and battling that staunch defense from Missouri. Who you got? Boston College versus Missouri.
BC looked great last week. They put up a lot of points. BC's having a great season. I am so impressed with Mizzou. Mizzou's at home. I like the Tigers.
Yep. I started off with Boston College because I watched most of that game against Florida State, and the quarterback for Florida, I think Charbonnet is his name, and the running back, that offense, they just ran all over and threw all over Florida State. I mean, just marched down the field multiple drives, and their offensive horsepower, I think, is going to be a tremendous matchup, particularly on the ground. I think if you look at Boston College's performance so far, again, 2 weeks, 2 games into the season, Boston College is one of the top-rated rushing programs in the country at this point, and the Tigers have one of the toughest defenses against the run. So I think that's where the game, I think, is going to be won or lost. I landed, and I'm going with Missouri in this one. I think it's going to be a close one, but I think, although Missouri hasn't had the toughest opponents in their first 2 weeks, but I just think they're going to be too much of a force in being at home in Columbia. I think Missouri wins and beats Boston College here. So I'm with you on that one. Next one, Friday night, September the 13th, Friday the 13th special for us. Arizona taking on Kansas State. And both of those teams had some games last weekend. Kansas State having to pull it out of where at the very end with the he was a 60-yard scoop and score. I don't know if you saw the ending of that Tulane game, but Kansas State has they don't have the best of luck with scheduling Tulane, and I think they want to look at and should reconsider, think very hard about re-signing another home and away with the Green Wave. But who you got with the Wildcats taking on the Wildcats?
It's the battle of the Wildcats.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. Cat fight, real cat fight.
I think this new quarterback at Kansas State is going to have a bounce back game. They're home. I like Kansas State. I know Arizona scored a lot of points. They've been playing well, but they're on the road. Kansas State's home. It's a bounce back game for them. I'm going to take Kansas State.
Well, we're only 1-1. 1-for-1 in terms of us matching up. We're going to diverge again, and I'm going to go with the Wildcats from out west, from Tucson. I think I don't know if week one. I think we referenced it. I think you mentioned it in last week's show. But this quarterback wide receiver matchup between Fafita and McMillan at Arizona. Wow. I mean, those two were together last year. And he was just Noah Fafita was a freshman last year. So still getting used to pace of play and size and what used to be the Pac-12. But I just think that their offensive horsepower, I think is going to be too much. And so I got Arizona going in and taking down the Kansas State team. So we'll see where we fare on that. Next one, bounce back game for the Irish. The Irish heading to West Lafayette to take on the Boilers. So who you got in the Irish facing the Boilermakers?
Andy, if this is not a redemption game, I don't know what is. If they can't win this game and this is a loss, you put them in the same sentence as Florida State.
Yeah.
So I got to go with the Irish.
Yeah. I'm with you. I think the Irish come back after that tragic loss last week. I think they take down Purdue. So I'm gonna for the second time in 3 weeks, I'm gonna pick the Irish, and let's see how they fare. Next one, big SEC matchup. Georgia heading up to Lexington, take on Big Blue and Kentucky.
Kentucky was blown out by South Carolina last week. They were blown off the field. If South Carolina blows them off the field, Georgia's going to annihilate them. You got to go with the Dogs.
Wow. Yeah, I'm taking the Dogs in this one too. I do think it's going to be closer than the experts think. I think it's going to be a bit of a pardon the word or the phrase, but I think it's going to be a bit of a dog fight. In this case, a dog and a cat fight. But I think it's going to be closer than folks think it's going to be. I'm not sure it's going to be a blowout, like you're insinuating, and probably some of the experts will on Saturday morning. But I think the Dogs get a test, but they still win. All right, next game up, and this is a game I'll have the fortune to be live at when the Bearcats march into southwestern Ohio and to take on the Red Hawks of Miami, Cincinnati at Miami, in traditional interstate rivalry. Who you got?
Andy, this is a fascinating game. This is a fascinating game, right?
Yeah.
Cincinnati on the road at a MAC stadium. You're going to be there. Miami of Ohio traditionally is a football powerhouse.
They won the MAC last year, my friend.
Yeah.
I did not know that, but they won the MAC. They were very competitive.
Cincinnati has not looked good. They're not a very talented team. You know what? I'm going to go with Miami at home.
Wow. Okay. Little maybe minor upset special.
Yeah.
I was reading something today, I think it was, and this will be the last time, I think, for the foreseeable future for this rivalry game, to be played at the home stadium, and it'll be the last time they play at Miami Stadium here. And I believe in 2025, it is going to be, or maybe in 2026, maybe next year will be the last year at Cincy, but in 2026 they're going to play at the Bengals field, which I'm not sure what that stadium's called now, who's sponsoring it, but This will be the last time for the foreseeable future that this rivalry game will be played on the turf there in Miami. I was just looking at some stats and performance. Miami again came off a really good year last year, very competitive. Week 1, they faced Northwestern up, along the beautiful shoreline of Lake Michigan, where the Wildcats are playing their season this year. Lost that game 13-6. So respectable, certainly respectable showing against a Big Ten team. And they've had a bye week this past weekend, and now they're heading into this game. I think Cincinnati's going to have a little bit too much horsepower up front. They've got an incredibly athletic quarterback that can sling the ball, can run the ball. So I just think they're going to be too much. So Brady Lichtenberg is he's under center there for the Bearcats, and I think he's going to be just a little too much for the Red Hawks. So I'm going Cincy in this one.
You're going to witness it, Andy.
I know. We'll see. We'll see how it goes. All right. Week 3 and the next game up, which is hard to believe that it is already coming up in the season, right? But the backyard brawl, my friend, in week 3.
So
West Virginia heading into Pitt.
So Andy, I'm not understanding why the NCAA has taken rivalry week and pushed it up. This doesn't make any sense from a fan perspective.
Yeah, they spread it all out, right? They used to all be in one weekend. I think it was maybe the closest second to last weekend of the season.
Yeah, that's when it was.
Yeah.
So for me, I love me some Pitt. Pitt, I think, is a team on the rise. I love the new quarterback. They're at home. I think they're a team on the come.
Okay. Pitt. Well, they had that was and I believe it was last weekend, but that was the game. I think Cincinnati actually had I think they had a pretty formidable lead against Pitt last weekend and ended up coughing that game up. Yeah, they lost 28-27, and Cincinnati was up. They were up 27-7 at the end of the third quarter. So I think Pitt
last week, right, Andy?
Yeah,
Pitt won by a field goal. It was a huge comeback.
Yep. Yeah, they won late in that game. I'm going West Virginia. I'm going to take the Mountaineers going into Pitt, and I think they're going to knock them off. I think West Virginia is going to have a little bit more in the tank. They lost to Penn State at home, but gave a good fight. But I think West Virginia, I'm going to take them over the Panthers in the backyard brawl. Next up, we've got Washington at Washington State. Again, two programs that have lost a lot of talent, in some cases key talent. I think Washington, we said in our season opener episode, I believe Washington returned one starter on both sides of the ball. So out of 22 positions, one guy came back. So they were decimated after that championship team run last year that Michael Penix led. And then, Washington State had a gem of a QB hidden up there in the northwestern part of the country. And then with the advent of the transfer portal, Cam Ward went to the big lights in the big city of Miami and is off and running there. So it should be an interesting game. Less exciting, and I think less talent perhaps on the field this year than we would have seen last year. But who you got?
For me, it's a coin flip. I'm going to go with the home team.
Wazoo.
Yeah, Wazoo.
Okay. Yep. I'm going Washington State as well. I think they're going to have a bit too much. So next game, the Aggies. Aggies rolling into Gainesville, into the swamp. This game, I think 2 weeks ago, even preseason, was getting hyped, right? Is potential national contenders facing off. And after just 2 weeks, a little bit of a different dynamic we've got going on with the Gators and the Aggies. But who are you taking in this matchup?
This, again, we talked about Notre Dame being in the spot. We talked about what happened at Florida State. To me, it's the same thing we talked about earlier. If Florida doesn't win this game, they have a problem. So I'm going to take the Gators.
Okay. Yep. I'm with you. I'm taking the Gators at home. I think they're going to get it done. There's just something off with the A&M program. It just does not seem to have all the pieces of the puzzle. Even doesn't have all the pieces in their possession, right? Not even they have them all in their possession. They just don't know how to put them all together. I'm not sure they've got all the pieces they need for that program to match the expectations of a lot of people. So I'm going Gators at the Swamp. So Aggie lose. I think it'll be a good matchup. I think it'll be a slugfest, but Florida wins out. Next one, we go out west. Get the Battle of the Mormons. We got Utah taking on Utah State. Utah State got waxed by USC last weekend, 48-0, I believe it was. Utah, a similar theme we've seen with the Utes and in that offense. Cam Rising left the game last week early, albeit late in the game, with an apparent hand injury. Kyle Whittingham, head coach, brushed it off as nothing, but we'll see how he does. But he has been injury prone over his 6 or 7 year college career, and that if he's not playing, that changes the dynamic of this game. But I guess we'll know that perhaps later in the week. At this point, it looks like he is going to play. But who do you got here?
I think the Utes just have too much talent. They got a pro style offense, and they have a pro coach. Herb Willingham is a great coach.
Yeah.
Utah.
Yeah, I'm going Utes as well. I think they're going to have too much. So next up, UCF taking on the Horned Frogs of TCU.
This is a tough one. This is a tough one for me, but TCU's at home. I'm going to take the Horned Frogs.
Yeah. I'm going to, in this one, like you said, bit of a toss-up. I'm going to go UCF on the road. I think they're gonna manage TCU and pull out the win. So I'm gonna take UCF in that game. Next one, this will be an interesting one. I think this is one I remember from last year in the text exchanges. But that late night battle and that brawl, Colorado versus Colorado State. Colorado State took them right to the final play in the wire in that game. But what do you think's going to happen here?
This is in the same vein as what we've been talking about, Notre Dame, Florida. If Colorado does not bounce back this week and has a revenge game against Colorado State, he's in trouble. He's not going to be the Pied Piper he thinks he is.
Yeah.
So I got Colorado.
You're going Colorado. I'm gonna go Colorado State. I think they're gonna remember those that were around. They're gonna remember the sting and the trash talk at the end of that game last year. That game was at Boulder last year. This year it is at Colorado State. The Buffs suffered a couple key injuries. Deion's other son, defensive back, broken forearm, as the running back from Nebraska sheared right through it. That's why you're always coached to never arm tackle. Rarely ends out in your favor, particularly when you're trying to tackle 200 plus pounds moving at speed. But I think Colorado State's going to win this game at home and really put that program on its heels. So Colorado State in this one. Next one, we'll go back out west. We got Wyoming taking on BYU.
I like BYU, Andy.
Yeah.
BYU going to beat the Cowboys.
Yeah, we're on the same page here. I'm taking BYU as well. I think they're gonna take on. I think Wyoming's not the program. They don't appear to be the program they were last year. And I think BYU has they've proven their merit here in the first 2 weeks, and so I think they'll win this game. So, all right, we're getting down to the final few picks here, folks. Second to last, we're going to go a bit out of order here, but big one at Camp Randall, my friend. Big one. We got Bama rolling into town to take on the Badgers.
You know, Andy, we talked about this. Jump around, my friend. Jump around. You jump around all you want. Bama's got the talent. Bama's got the quarterback. Bama's got the team. I like Alabama. Roll Tide.
Roll Tide, roll, man. I think I think Bama's going to continue to power their way through the season. I think they are going to be faced with some challenges. I do believe they will make it into the playoff. I think they can make a deep run. I don't know if you watched any of that game against USF on Saturday night, but at the end of the third quarter and the start of the fourth, I think a switch was flipped in Bama, a recognition that they needed to get their stuff together. And, that game was less than a one-score game and was tied at one point for a long time. And they ended up putting up 42 points after only 14 points, I believe, in three quarters. So I think when we look back on the season, the end of that third quarter against USF is going to be the turning point for the Bama program. So I've got the Tide rolling into Camp Randall and winning handily, I believe. So, all right, folks, listeners, to the last pick, classic rivalry game, the Civil War, again out on the left coast up there in Oregon. We've got the Ducks marching in to take on the Beavers, and this one's going to, as usual with any rivalry game, I think it'll be a slugfest. I don't think Oregon State's as formidable and dangerous as they were last year when they had DJ under center. I think they were a bit of a sleeper team that pulled off some pretty big wins last year. I don't think they're in that same position. I think after the first 2 weeks of the Ducks' performance, I think Lanning's going to have his boys ready to rock and roll. And I'm taking the Ducks in this one. And I think this one is going to be, when we get on the show next week, I think we're going to say that's the Oregon program we all thought we would see in week 1 and week 2. So I feel a bit sorry for the Beavers, but I think Oregon is going to, I think they're going to dominate. Big win for the Ducks.
And what I say is not so fast, my friend.
Oh, wow.
Beaver fever. We're ready for the Ducks.
He's got the T-shirt reveal with the Beaver Fever. Where'd you get that shirt from, my friend?
I got this from an old friend of mine in Herv Jones. His name is Big Jim Kelly.
Nice.
Yep. Shout out to Jim Kelly, who is actually an Oregon resident and an Oregon fan.
That's right. Well, we'll see how we fare. We had a lot of divergent picks this week, so it'll be interesting to see what the records show at the end of the week. But that's a wrap for our week 3, our third episode. Hope everybody's enjoying it. Again, you can catch us, subscribe to us on YouTube, and you can also catch us on Spotify, iHeart, wherever you get your podcasts, and follow us on the social media sites on Instagram and X. But we love bringing the passion and the joy for the game to you all. It's been a real pleasure so far, and good luck and Godspeed into your picks and to your teams this week. We'll see you all next week. Stay safe.